Dr. Hansol Park stared at her computer screen in the dimly lit laboratory of the Seoul Interstellar Research Center. The clock on the wall showed 3:15 a.m., but she couldn't sleep. Not tonight. Not when her instruments were picking up something so strange from Saturn's rings. This can't be right, she whispered to herself, adjusting her glasses. The energy readings were unlike anything she had seen before. They weren't natural, and they definitely weren't from the Drachnid ships that now surrounded Earth's solar system. The Drachnids had arrived 3 days ago, their massive fleet appearing just beyond Mars' orbit. Their ships looked like giant dark crystals, each one bigger than the largest city on Earth. They had broadcast their message in every human language. Submit to Drachnid protection, or face destruction. Hansol took another sip of her cold coffee and looked at the pictures on her desk. One showed her with her research team, all smiling after receiving their funding grant last year. The other was from her graduation day with her best friend and fellow scientist, Ji-won Kim. Those happy days felt like they belonged to another lifetime now. She picked up her phone and called Ji-won. After 3 rings, a tired voice answered. Hansol, it's the middle of the night. Ji-won, I found something. Something big. Can you come to the lab? There was a pause, then the sound of movement. Give me 20 minutes. While waiting for Ji-won, Hansol checked her readings again. The energy signature was still there, hidden in Saturn's rings like a whisper in a crowded room. Whatever was making these patterns was trying very hard not to be noticed. Ji-won arrived exactly 20 minutes later, his white lab coat thrown hastily over a wrinkled t-shirt. His usually neat black hair was messy, but his eyes were alert. Show me, he said, pulling up a chair next to Hansol. She pointed to her screen. Look at these energy patterns from Saturn's rings. They're artificial, but they're not Drachnid technology. The signature is completely different. Ji-won leaned closer, his eyes widening. You're right. This is something else entirely. But who would be hiding in Saturn's rings? I don't know, Hansol said, but they've been there for at least a month, maybe longer. They were there before the Drachnids arrived. Ji-won typed quickly on the keyboard, pulling up more data. Have you told anyone else about this? Hansol shook her head. Not yet. I wanted you to check my work first. Good thinking. We need to be absolutely sure before we report this. Ji-won paused, then added, the world is scared enough already. He was right. Since the Drachnids' arrival, panic had spread across Earth. Some people wanted to fight, others wanted to surrender, and many were simply trying to enjoy what might be their last days of freedom. The governments of Earth had united quickly, forming the Earth Defense Coalition, but everyone knew their weapons were no match for the Drachnid fleet. As they worked through the night, analyzing the mysterious signals, the sun began to rise over Seoul. The city was quieter these days. Many people had left for the countryside, hoping to escape whatever fate awaited them in the cities. At 7:30 a.m., their office door opened. Director Tae-young Choi walked in, his face showing the strain of sleepless nights. Dr. Park, Dr. Kim, he said, nodding to them. Any progress? Hansol and Ji-won exchanged glances. Hansol took a deep breath and said, Yes, Director. We found something you need to see. They showed him their discovery. Director Choi listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with each detail. Another alien species, he said finally, hiding in our solar system. Yes, sir, Ji-won answered. And based on their energy signature, they're using technology far more advanced than even the Drachnids. Director Choi sat down heavily in a chair. Do you think they're hostile? No, Hansol said quickly. If they were hostile, why hide? Why watch us for so long without making any move? Unless they're waiting for something. Director Choi said darkly. Sir, Hansol leaned forward. I think we should try to contact them. The director looked at her sharply. Contact them. Dr. Park, we're already facing one alien invasion. Do you want to risk attracting another? With respect, sir, Jai-1 interrupted. We're going to lose against the Drachnids if we fight alone. We all know that. If there's even a small chance these observers might help us, isn't it worth trying? Director Choi was quiet for a long time. Outside, they could hear the distant sound of military vehicles moving through the streets. The Earth Defense Coalition was preparing for war, even though everyone knew it would be hopeless. Finally, he nodded. Do it, but be careful. If the Drachnids discover we're communicating with another species, they might attack immediately. Han Sol and Jae-1 spent the next 3 days preparing their message. They decided to use simple mathematical sequences, followed by basic images showing Earth and its people. They included pictures of human achievements in art, science, and architecture, but also images of families, children playing, and people helping each other. We need to show them who we really are, Han Sol said as they worked. Not just what we can do, but who we are as people. On the 4th day, they were ready. Using a focused energy beam aimed at the coordinates where they had detected the alien presence, they sent their message. Then they waited. Hours passed. Then days. The Drachnid fleet remained in position, their dark ships casting shadows on Mars when the sun hit them at the right angle. Earth's governments continued their preparations for war, and people continued to live in fear. 1 week after sending their message, Han Sol was alone in the lab late at night again. Ji-1 had gone home to rest, but she couldn't sleep. She kept checking her instruments, hoping for any sign of a response. Suddenly, her computer screen flickered. New data began streaming in. Her heart racing. She called Jai-1. They answered. She said as soon as he picked up. 20 minutes later, they were both staring at the response. It was beautiful in its simplicity, a series of mathematical equations that, when solved, created an image. The image showed 2 figures holding hands, one human and one alien. The alien figure was tall and slender, with luminescent skin that seemed to glow with its own light. Below the image was a message in perfect Korean. We are the Lumini. We have been watching. We come in peace. Han Sol and Ji-1 worked through the night, exchanging messages with the Lumini. They learned that the Lumini were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful observers. They never interfered in other species' affairs, preferring to watch and learn. But why reveal yourselves to us now? Han Sol asked in their message. The response came quickly. Because you reached out to us. Because you showed us not your weapons or your threats, but your art, your families, your kindness. We have watched many species, but few have shown such potential for both great wisdom and great compassion. Hope began to grow in Han Sol's heart. But then came the Lumini's next message. However, we cannot interfere with the Drachnid Empire's actions. It is not our way. Jai-1 slumped in his chair. So that's it. They'll just watch as the Drachnids destroy us. Han Sol shook her head. No, there has to be a way. The Lumini reached back to us for a reason. They must see something in humanity worth saving. Their discussion was interrupted by a loud alarm. Red lights began flashing throughout the building. Director Choi burst into the lab. The Drachnids are broadcasting again, he said, turning on the large screen on the wall. The screen showed the face of the Drachnid High Commander. His skin was dark and crystalline, like his ships, with eyes that glowed with an inner fire. People of Earth, the High Commander said, his voice translated into all Earth languages simultaneously. You have had time to consider our generous offer of protection. Now you have 30 Earth days to submit to Drachnid authority. If you refuse, we will have no choice but to cleanse your world and start anew with more cooperative specimens of your species. The message ended, leaving the lab in silence. 30 days, Director Choi said quietly. That's all we have left. Han Sol looked at her computer screen, where the last message from the Lumini still glowed. Then she looked at Jai-1, seeing the same determination in his eyes that she felt. No, she said firmly. We have 30 days to convince the most peaceful species in the galaxy to take a stand. The Lumini say they don't interfere, but they've already broken that rule by answering us. There's more going on here than we understand, and we're going to figure it out. Jai-1 nodded, already turning back to his computer. Where do we start? Han-Sol picked up the picture from her desk, the one of her research team smiling with hope for the future. We start by learning everything we can about the Lumini. There has to be a reason they've stayed hidden all this time, watching us. And there has to be a reason they chose to answer us now. As the sun rose over Seoul, casting long shadows from the military vehicles in the streets, Han-Sol and Jai-1 began their race against time. Somewhere in Saturn's rings, the Lumini were watching, and somewhere in the answers they had already given was the key to saving humanity. They just had to find it before the Drachnid's deadline expired. The fate of Earth now rested not just on its weapons or its armies, but on the understanding that would develop between two scientists in Seoul and the mysterious observers who had finally chosen to break their silence. 25 days remained until the Drachnid deadline. Han-Sol sat in her lab, surrounded by data screens showing her conversations with the Lumini. She had barely slept in the past 5 days, sustained only by coffee and determination. Her eyes were tired, but she couldn't stop reading. The Lumini had shared information about their culture freely once communication began. They were a species that valued truth above all else. Their entire society was built on the idea that observing and understanding the universe was the highest calling. They had watched countless civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy, never interfering, only learning. Jai-1 entered the lab carrying 2 boxes of food. "You need to eat," he said, placing one box in front of Han-Sol. "Even scientists saving the world need food." She smiled weakly and opened the box. Inside was her favorite bibimbap from the small restaurant down the street that was still open. "Thanks. Any news from the Defense Coalition?" Jai-1's face darkened. "They're moving more missiles into position around major cities, but everyone knows it won't be enough. The Drachnid's shields are too strong." Han-Sol picked at her food, thinking, the Lumini must have seen the Drachnids attack other worlds before. They'd been watching the galaxy for thousands of years. Why won't they share that information with us? "Maybe because we haven't asked the right questions," Jai-1 said, sitting down at his computer. "We've been asking about their observations of the Drachnids. Maybe we should be asking about their observations of the worlds the Drachnids have protected." Han-Sol sat up straighter. "Jai-1, you're brilliant." She turned to her computer and began typing a new message to their Lumini contact. Over the past few days, they had been communicating with a young Lumini researcher named Aura. Unlike the formal responses they got from other Lumini, Aura seemed genuinely curious about humans and willing to engage in longer conversations. "Aura," Han-Sol wrote, "we understand you cannot interfere with the Drachnid's actions, but can you share what you have observed about the worlds that accepted Drachnid protection? We wish to understand what future awaits us." The response came faster than usual. "This request falls within our principles of sharing observed truth. I will show you." The next transmission contained images and data about worlds that had accepted Drachnid rule. The pictures made Han-Sol's heart sink. Once beautiful cities lay in ruins. Native species were forced to work in massive mines, extracting resources for the Drachnid Empire. Cultural artifacts were destroyed, replaced by Drachnid monuments. "But this doesn't make sense," Jai-1 said, looking at the images. "The Drachnids told us they protect and preserve civilizations. These images show the opposite." Another message from Aura appeared. "Your observation is correct. There is a discrepancy between Drachnid statements and observed reality." Han-Sol felt her pulse quicken. "G1, look at how carefully Aura worded that message. The Lumini value truth above all else. What if that's the key? What if the reason they answered our call wasn't just because we showed them our art and families?" "What do you mean?" "What if they answered because they saw a chance to expose a lie?" Han-Sol began typing rapidly. "Aura, in your observations of human civilization, have you seen evidence that we pose a threat to galactic peace?" "No," came the reply. Human space exploration has been peaceful. Your messages to space have sought friendship. Your wars have been internal, not expansionist. This matches our observations of many young species. Han Sol and Ji-1 worked through the night, gathering more information. With each exchange, Aura seemed to become more engaged, sharing more detailed observations. The pattern became clear. The Drachnids had been systematically lying about the civilizations they conquered, always claiming they were dangerous or unstable and needed protection. As dawn broke over Seoul, Director Choi found them still working. Dark circles under their eyes showed their exhaustion, but their faces were animated with excitement. Director, Han Sol said as soon as he walked in, "We found something important. The Drachnids have been lying, not just to us, but to the entire galaxy. They claim they're protecting worlds, but they're really conquering them for resources. And this helps us how?" Director Choi asked, though he leaned forward with interest. "The Lumini value truth above everything else," Ji-1 explained. "Their whole society is based on observing and recording what really happens. The Drachnids are making claims that contradict the Lumini's observations, and that creates a conflict for them," Han Sol added. "Their policy of non-interference is based on letting events unfold naturally. But what if their inaction allows a massive deception to succeed?" Director Choi rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You think you can convince the Lumini to help us by appealing to their dedication to truth?" "Maybe," Han Sol said. "But we need more evidence. Aura has been helping us, but one young researcher's observations won't be enough to convince their whole species." Just then, Han Sol's computer chimed with a new message from Aura. "Your questions have caused much discussion among my people. Some of our observers have begun sharing their own records of Drachnid conquests. There is concern about the pattern we are seeing." While they read this message, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Director Choi rushed to turn on the main screen. The Drachnid High Commander's face appeared again. "People of Earth," he announced, his crystalline features sharp with anger. "We have detected unauthorized communication signals from your planet. This violation of our quarantine will not be tolerated. You now have 20 days to submit to our authority, not 30. Choose wisely." The screen went dark. Director Choi turned to Han Sol and Ji-1 with worry in his eyes. "They detected your communications with the Lumini." "No," Ji-1 said, checking his instruments. "The Lumini's technology is far beyond the Drachnids. They must have detected other signals. Look, there are hundreds of unofficial transmission attempts coming from all over Earth. People trying to call for help from anyone who might be listening." Han Sol turned back to her computer and typed quickly, "Aura, the Drachnids are punishing us for seeking help from others. They're using our natural response to their threats as justification for attacking sooner. Is this a pattern you have observed before?" There was a long pause before Aura's response came. "Yes, this matches observations from 17 other worlds. The Drachnids create situations that force species to take actions, which they then use to justify invasion. This is troubling." The word troubling was different from Aura's usual precise language. Han Sol sensed an opportunity. "Aura," she wrote, "you say this troubles you. Why?" "Because it indicates deliberate deception. The Drachnids are not merely protecting worlds as they claim. They are manufacturing situations to justify conquest. This contradicts the fundamental nature of truth." Ji-1 leaned forward excitedly. "Han Sol, look at how Aura's language is changing. Earlier messages were just observations. Now there's emotional content." Han Sol nodded and typed, "Aura, what happens to truth if those who know it refuse to speak it?" This time, the pause was very long. When the answer came, it was longer than any previous message. "Your question has caused significant disruption among my people. Many are now reviewing their policy of non-interference. If observation reveals a truth, but that truth is never shared, does the truth truly exist? If we allow deliberate falsehoods to shape the galaxy's events, are we not participating in those falsehoods through our silence?" Director Choi read the message over Han Sol's shoulder. "You're getting through to them," he said softly. Han Sol felt hope rising in her chest. She typed again. "Aura, we don't ask you to fight. We ask only that you share what you have observed. Is sharing truth the same as interference?" Another long pause. Then, "This question must be taken to our High Council. All observers are now sharing their records of Drachnid activities. We request patience while we analyze this information." For the next 2 days, the Lumini fell silent. Han Sol and J1 took turns sleeping on the small couch in their lab, not wanting to miss any communication. Around the world, military preparations continued. The Drachnid ships remained in position, dark and threatening against the stars. On the morning of the 3rd day, their computer came alive with a new message from Aura. "The High Council has spent much time discussing the nature of truth and observation. Your questions have forced us to confront an inconsistency in our philosophy. If we observe but never share our observations, we are allowing ignorance to persist where knowledge could exist. This may be a form of interference through inaction." Han Sol read the message aloud to Jaiwan and Director Choi. Her hands were shaking with excitement. "They're getting there," she said. "They're starting to see that staying neutral in the face of deliberate deception isn't really neutral at all." Director Choi checked his watch. "We have 17 days left. Keep pushing, but be careful. We don't want to push them away by being too aggressive." Han Sol nodded and began typing her response. As the sun rose higher over Seoul, she felt a growing sense of possibility. The Lumini were questioning their oldest beliefs because of humanity's questions. Sometimes, the greatest weapons weren't lasers or bombs, but simple questions that made people think about what they really believed. She looked at the picture on her desk again, the one of her research team smiling with hope for the future. Maybe that future wasn't lost after all. Maybe it just needed a gentle push in the direction of truth. 5 days remained until the Drachnid deadline. The Seoul Interstellar Research Center buzzed with activity as scientists and military officers moved quickly through its halls. In their lab, Han Sol and Ji-1 prepared for the most important presentation of their lives. "Are you sure about these numbers?" Ji-1 asked, checking the data on his screen for the 10th time. Han Sol nodded, her tired eyes fixed on her own computer. Aura confirmed them. The Drachnids have invaded 32 worlds in the past 100 years. Every time, they used the same excuse about protection. Director Choi entered the lab, followed by Young-Ho Lee, Earth's diplomatic representative to the Lumini. Young-Ho wore a formal suit, but his face showed the strain of sleepless nights. "The Lumini High Council will hear our case in 2 hours," Young-Ho said. "Are you ready?" Han Sol looked at the massive amount of evidence they had gathered. With Aura's help, they had collected observations from hundreds of Lumini researchers. Each observation showed the same pattern. The Drachnids would arrive at a world, create a situation that forced the inhabitants to react, then use that reaction as an excuse for invasion. "We're ready," Han Sol said firmly. "We just hope it's enough." The presentation would happen through a direct communication link with the Lumini High Council. Aura had helped set up the connection using Lumini technology, which the Drachnids couldn't detect. As they waited for the appointed time, Han Sol thought about everything that had led to this moment. The Lumini had watched humanity for years without making contact. Now they were willing to listen to Earth's case. It wasn't much, but it was hope. At exactly noon, their main screen lit up. The image showed a circular chamber filled with tall, luminescent beings. The Lumini High Council members glowed with different colors, some blue, some gold, some pure white. Their forms seemed to shift and flow like light on water. In the center of the chamber stood Aura, her form glowing with a gentle silver light. She would translate for both sides. "Honored Council," Aura began, her voice somehow both musical and precise. "I present Dr. Han Sol Park and Dr. Ji-1 Kim of Earth and diplomatic representative Young-Ho Lee." Young-Ho stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Thank you for hearing us. Noble Council, we come seeking not your intervention, but your truth. The council members shifted, their lights pulsing gently. The head of the council, glowing with pure white light, spoke through Aura's translation. We have reviewed the initial evidence presented by researcher Aura. It is concerning. Please present your full case. Hansol took a deep breath and began. She showed the council everything they had discovered. She started with the Drachnid's first contact with Earth, comparing their threats with the peaceful messages humans had been sending into space for decades. Then she showed the evidence from other worlds. On screen after screen, the pattern became clear. The Drachnids would demand submission, then create situations that forced civilizations to either fight back or give up their freedom. But the most important evidence, Hansol said, comes from your own observations. She displayed the data Aura had helped them collect. Lumini observers had recorded everything. They had seen the Drachnids plant weapons on peaceful worlds, create false evidence of aggression, and even stage attacks on their own ships to justify invasion. The Drachnids aren't protecting anyone, Jai-1 added. They're using lies to build their empire. Every world they've conquered was peaceful before they arrived. The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Then another council member, glowing blue, spoke. This evidence is compelling, but our policy of non-interference has served us for millennia. Why should we change it now? Young-ho stepped forward again. Respected council, may I speak? At their gesture of agreement, he continued. You value truth above all else. Your society is built on observing and understanding what is real. But what happens to truth when those who know it remain silent? The council members' lights flickered rapidly, showing their agitation. Young-ho pressed on. If you see someone tell a lie, and you stay silent, are you not helping that lie succeed? If you watch an entire civilization be destroyed because of false accusations, and you say nothing, are you not participating in that destruction? These are dangerous questions, the head council member said. They challenge the foundation of our society. Yes, Young-ho agreed. But isn't seeking truth sometimes dangerous? Doesn't real truth sometimes require us to question even our oldest beliefs? Hansol watched the council members' lights pulse and shift. She could tell they were troubled by these questions. Then Aura spoke up. Honored council, may I share my observations? When they nodded, Aura's silver light brightened. In my time studying humans, I have seen them face many challenges. They often disagree with each other, sometimes violently. But they also show remarkable ability to question their beliefs and change when they see truth. Aura's form moved forward. Humans sent peaceful messages into space for years, knowing they might never get an answer. When the Drachnids threatened them, they didn't immediately prepare for war. Instead, they reached out to us, seeking understanding. And in doing so, Aura continued, they forced us to question our own beliefs. Is that not what we value most? The pursuit of greater understanding. The council chamber erupted in pulses of light as the members communicated with each other. Hansol held her breath. On the screens behind her, the evidence of Drachnid deception continued to play. Finally, the head council member spoke again. We must consider implications beyond Earth. If we acknowledge these truths, we may be forced to act on them. We don't ask you to fight, Hansol said quickly. We ask only that you share what you have seen. Let the galaxy know the truth about the Drachnid's actions. Sharing truth is not the same as interference, Jai-1 added. It's what you've always done. The only difference is making your observations public instead of keeping them hidden. The council fell silent again. Their lights moved in complex patterns as they discussed among themselves. Minutes stretched into hours. Hansol, Jai-1, and Young-ho waited, knowing the fate of Earth might depend on this decision. Outside their lab, Seoul was quiet. Most people had left the cities, fearing the coming Drachnid attack. Those who remained went about their lives as best they could, trying to find moments of joy in what might be their last days of freedom. Finally, the head council member spoke. We have reached a decision. Researcher Aura, please share our thoughts. Aura's silver light brightened again. The Council recognizes that their policy of non-interference has had an unintended effect. By withholding our observations, we have allowed falsehood to flourish. This goes against our most fundamental principles. Hope began to grow in Hansol's chest as Aura continued. Therefore, the Council has decided we will not interfere directly in the conflict between Earth and the Drachnid Empire. However, we will share our observations of Drachnid activities with all spacefaring races. We will let truth speak for itself. Young Ho bowed deeply. Thank you, noble Council. You honor us with your wisdom. Do not thank us yet, the head council member said. The truth may not be enough to save your world. The Drachnid's power is real, even if their justifications are false. Truth has its own power, Hansol said. You've taught us that. The council members' lights pulsed one final time before the screen went dark. For a moment, the lab was silent. Then Director Choi spoke from where he had been quietly watching. What happens now? Hansol turned to her computer, where a message from Aura was already waiting. Now, she said, we help the Lumini share their evidence with every civilization in the galaxy. We have 5 days to let truth do its work. Jaiwan smiled for the first time in days. The Drachnids think they're about to conquer another peaceful world. They don't realize they're about to face something more powerful than any weapon. What's that? Director Choi asked. The truth, Hansol said, beginning to type, and the courage of those willing to speak it. As night fell over Seoul, the lab hummed with activity. Hansol, Jaiwan, and their team worked with Aura to prepare the Lumini's evidence for transmission. Soon, every spacefaring race would know the truth about the Drachnid Empire's actions. The most peaceful species in the galaxy had finally taken a stand, not with weapons or threats, but with something far more powerful, the simple, unshakable power of truth revealed. The last 5 days before the Drachnid deadline passed quickly. Hansol barely left her lab, working constantly with Jaiwan and Aura to share the Lumini's evidence across the galaxy. They sent thousands of transmissions containing proof of the Drachnid's deceptions. Each transmission included detailed observations from Lumini researchers. The evidence showed clearly how the Drachnids had lied about every world they invaded. It showed peaceful civilizations destroyed not because they were dangerous, but because they had resources the Drachnids wanted. On the morning of the final day, Hansol stood at her lab window, watching the sunrise. The sky was beautiful, painted in shades of pink and gold. She wondered if it would be the last sunrise she would see as a free person. The last transmission package just went out, Jaiwan said from his computer. Every spacefaring race in the galaxy now has access to the Lumini's observations. Director Choi entered the lab, followed by Yumbo. Both men looked tired but determined. Any response from other civilizations? Yumho asked. Some, Hansol said, turning from the window. But not enough. Not yet. Suddenly, their main screen lit up. The Drachnid High Commander's crystalline face appeared, his eyes burning with their inner fire. People of Earth, he announced, his voice cold and sharp. Your time has expired. You have chosen to reject our generous offer of protection. Now, you will face the consequences of your decision. The screen showed the Drachnid fleet beginning to move. The massive ships, dark against the stars, started their approach toward Earth. They're coming, Director Choi said quietly. Hansol's computer chimed with a message from Aura. Do not lose hope. Truth moves slowly, but its power grows with time. As if to prove Aura's words, new messages began appearing on their screens. First one, then dozens, then hundreds. Civilizations across the galaxy were responding to the Lumini's evidence. Look at this, Jaiwan said excitedly. The Centauri Alliance is denouncing the Drachnids. They're demanding an explanation for the evidence. The Rigel Federation too, Hansol added, reading quickly. They're calling for an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. Young Ho leaned forward to read the messages. The Drachnid's allies are asking questions. Some are already withdrawing their support. The main screen lit up again. This time it showed not just the High Commander, but what appeared to be an argument among Drachnid leaders. Their crystalline faces were sharp with anger as they spoke in their own language. Then another transmission cut in. This one showed a different alien species, tall, blue-skinned beings that Hansol recognized from her studies as the Centauri. Drachnid Empire, the Centauri leader said, "We have received disturbing evidence of your activities. We demand you halt your advance on Earth immediately until these accusations can be investigated." Before the High Commander could respond, more transmissions broke in. Leaders from dozens of civilizations appeared on split screens, all demanding the Drachnids stop their attack. "It's working," Jai-1 whispered. "The truth is actually working." The Drachnid High Commander's face showed rage as he responded. "These accusations are false. We act only to protect the galaxy from dangerous species." "That is incorrect," a new voice said. Everyone in the lab gasped as they recognized the musical tones of the Lumini Council member. The luminescent being appeared on all screens, its pure white light steady and strong. "We have observed your actions for centuries," the council member continued. "We have recorded every deception, every manufactured crisis, every false accusation you have used to justify your conquests. We have shared these observations with all." The High Commander's face twisted with fury. "You dare to interfere? You, who have hidden and watched while claiming neutrality." "We do not interfere," the council member replied calmly. "We simply share what we have observed. The truth speaks for itself." More transmissions poured in. Species that had been neutral were now taking sides, not with weapons, but with words. They condemned the Drachnids' deceptions. They'd promised sanctions if the attack on Earth continued. Hansol watched in amazement as the Drachnid fleet stopped its advance. On their screens, they could see some of the dark ships actually beginning to turn away. "High Commander," another Drachnid leader said, his voice sharp with worry, "we must reconsider. If these sanctions are imposed, our empire will collapse. We cannot allow these lies." The High Commander shouted. "They are not lies," the Lumini Council member said. "They are observed truths. Your own allies can see this now. Your power was built on deception. Now that the truth is known, that power fades." Hour by hour, more support for the Drachnids crumbled. Trade agreements were suspended. Military alliances were withdrawn. Species that had feared to stand against the Empire now found their courage, backed by the undeniable evidence of the Lumini's observations. By sunset, the Drachnid fleet was in full retreat. The dark ships moved back beyond Mars' orbit, then disappeared into deep space. In the lab, Hansol, Jai-1, Director Choi, and Young-ho watched in stunned silence. Then Young-ho began to laugh, a sound of pure joy and relief. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it. We defeated an empire without firing a single shot." Hansol's computer chimed one last time. Aura's message appeared. "You have shown us something important. Sometimes the most powerful action is simply sharing the truth. You helped us understand that staying silent in the face of lies is its own form of interference." As night fell over Seoul, the city began to come alive again. People emerged from their homes, looking up at the stars with new hope. The Drachnid threat was gone, but something more important had been gained. 1 week later, Hansol stood in her lab, looking at the pictures on her desk. The old photo of her research team was now joined by a new one, showing her, Jai-1, and Young-ho standing with a hologram of Aura, all of them smiling. "The Lumini High Council has approved our proposal," Jai-1 said, entering the lab with fresh coffee. "They want us to help establish the Interstellar Truth Coalition." Hansol smiled, a group dedicated to sharing honest observations and promoting understanding between species. Who would have thought the most peaceful species in the galaxy would help create something like that? "They needed us as much as we needed them," Jai-1 said. "We helped them see that sometimes staying neutral isn't the same as staying true to your principles." Han Sol's computer showed a new message from Aura. The Council has assigned me as permanent liaison to Earth. They say I have shown wisdom in knowing when truth must be actively shared, not simply observed. I look forward to continuing our work together. Outside, the sun set on a changed Earth. Humanity had faced its greatest threat and survived, not through force of arms, but through the power of truth and the courage of those willing to speak it. The stars shone brightly in the evening sky. Somewhere out there, the Lumini continued their observations, but now with a new understanding of their role in the galaxy. And somewhere even further, the Drachnid Empire was learning a lesson that would echo through history. In the end, truth was the most powerful force of all. Han Sol looked at the new picture on her desk and smiled. The bridge between worlds had been built, not with steel and concrete, but with understanding and honesty. And that bridge would last far longer than any empire built on lies. Ready to get back to work? Jae-won asked, handing her a coffee. Always, she replied, turning to her computer. There was still so much to learn, so much truth to understand and share. The adventure wasn't ending. It was just beginning.